الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم اللهم افتح لنا فتوح العارفين ووافقنا توفيق الصالحين وانفعنا بالقرآن وذكر الحكيم اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا بما ينفعنا وزدنا علما يقربنا منك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت يا حي يا قيوم تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا سهلا اللهم أعذنا من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا وأصلح لنا شأننا كله لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. Where have you got your phone? Just in case. So inshallah, continuing on from the Tafsir Surah Al-Kahf, I believe we got down to this ayah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم فلعلك باخع نفسك على آثارهم إن لم يؤمنوا بهذا الحديث أسفا. It may be that you, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, are destroying yourself or almost killing yourself or torturing yourself because they do not believe in this message. Ala atharihim, meaning, in their traces or following their traces, or talking about the Quraysh, his people who wouldn't believe in the message. Asafa, just to emphasize there, asafan, the grief that the Prophet ﷺ was feeling when he was bringing the message to the Quraysh, but many of them were not responding to the message. So, I think that's the point we got up to anyway. Okay. So Imam al-Razi rahimahullah, he says, in this particular ayah, فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعُ نَفْسَكَ عَلَىٰ آثَارِهِمْ إِنْ لَمْ يُؤْمِنُوا بِهَذَا الْحَدِيثِ أَسَفًا. He says there are several points of interest, or several points to mention. البحث الأول, the first point, المقصود منه أن يقال للرسول لا يعظم حزنك وأسفك بسبب كفرهم فإنا بعثناك منذرا ومبشرا. So it says the meaning or the objective, or the meaning of this particular ayah is to the Prophet ﷺ, don't be too distressed and grieved on account of those who are disbelieving, because we have sent you as a warner and a giver of good tidings, as the surah begins, so that you may warn and give good tidings to the believers. فأما تحصيل الإيمان في قلوبهم فلا قدرة لك عليه. As for if they should believe or not believe, you have got no power over that. You have no ability over that. That is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. يرحمك الله. والغرض تسلية الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم عنه. So the objective of this is also to give comfort to the Prophet ﷺ, because he was bringing this message to the Quraysh. Yesterday, in fact, in the Sirah gathering also, we were on a similar stage, the stage of da'wah, where the Prophet ﷺ was first ordered to then take the message to the Quraysh, to the people around him, and to his family and to his tribe. So he took the message out to them, and many of them, they didn't believe in it, they didn't accept it, and they turned actually in enmity and mockery and all sorts of different reactions that they had to the Prophet ﷺ. And this led to him, as the ayah mentions, this led to him being very distressed on their account. Not on his own account. على آثارهم, you know. فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ عَلَى آثَارِهِمْ. على آثارهم literally means, athar mean traces. So their traces, you know, you're following in their footsteps or their traces, and you're feeling grieved because they're not believing in this message. So this was because of the concern of the Prophet ﷺ towards his people. You know, if you have parents, family, and they're not Muslim, you got a concern there. You have a very serious concern, you know, that you want them to become Muslim. You don't want them to go to the hellfire. Or if you even have family, if you're born Muslim, you have family, but say they're not practicing, you know, your parents say they don't pray or something, you're going to have a serious concern there. You're going to be thinking all the time, how can I get them into the deen? You know, you're making a lot of dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah help them, guide them. Why? Because they're people that you love, and you don't want them to be in punishment or in the hellfire. So the Prophet ﷺ, he was amongst his people, the Quraysh, the tribe of Quraysh, and the definition of a tribe is that it's descended from one person. Any tribe you have, it can always be traced back to one individual. That's the definition of a tribe. So the Quraysh, they all descended from one person. His name was Fihr, and the lineages are, you know, quite well known amongst the Arabs. So Fihr, he was the one whose name was Quraysh. So the Quraysh tribe were named after him. So in a way, you know, when the Prophet ﷺ was going to the Quraysh in Mecca, these were all his family. This is all his family. And similar applies to us, you know, because our family is, the whole of human being is our family. You know, the whole of a human being is our family, really. Because as the Prophet ﷺ mentioned on the Mi'raj, you know, when he was on the Mi'raj, he saw many different things. And one of the things he saw a man with a white beard, and there was two groups of people, one on each side. I think it was children actually on each side. And when he was looking at the people on one side, he was smiling and laughing. And when he looked at the group on the other side, he started crying. And the Prophet ﷺ asked Jibreel alayhi salam, who was that man? Why was he looking at this side and then laughing, and looking at the other side and then crying? And he said, that was your father Adam alayhi salam. And on the right side were all of his children that go into Jannah. So when he saw them, he smiled and laughed. And then when he looked to the left, he saw all of his children that were going to the hellfire. And that made him weep. So that's just an indication that all of us are from the family of the human being. The enemy of the human being is Iblis. As the Quran says, you know, he's your enemy. Take him as an enemy. So there's no benefit for us if any human beings are going to go into the hellfire. Because ultimately it's our family. The only person who's laughing is Iblis. It's Shaitan who has got them into the hellfire. So that's why we can then have a concern for all human beings. Because they are ultimately, we are all related, you know, back to one mother and father. The other thing about the Prophet ﷺ, the amazing thing about him, is, as you know, all previous prophets were sent to certain people. The Prophet ﷺ is sent to all mankind. And recent research in genetics has revealed that because they can trace human ancestry through certain genes and markers in people's chromosomes, so they can trace back, you know, where you come back from centuries and centuries and thousands of years back, where your ancestors lived, because they can trace those markers that are in your chromosomes today back to where, you know, what they found thousands of years ago. So there was a program on the BBC about this, and they were saying the evidence points towards that people first spread in Africa, in the continent of Africa. But from there, uh, they believe that the group that came across, they believe a group came across from the north part of Africa into Arabia. And from Arabia, this was the spread of all human beings around the world, was from Arabia. So in other words, wherever you live in the whole world except for Africa, they believe that we all ancestors came from Arabia. So the Prophet ﷺ, in other words, he came, in that place in Arabia, which is the home of our ancestors, of all human beings around the world. So that's why he's a messenger to the whole world. So I think that's quite an amazing insight, quite an amazing discovery. Because obviously we always learn that the Prophet ﷺ was a messenger to the Arabs, and then to the rest of the world, because that was his people. But according to these research findings, in fact, all of us trace our roots back to Arabia, to that place. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the thing is also, because in tradition or sort of legend, um, I'm not sure how strong the narrations are, but that Adam alayhi salam, he was in Arabia as well. Various narrations about how he met with Hawa in the Arafat, the plain of Arafat, is where they met, Adam and Hawa, after they were sent down from Jannah. So it's quite possible from there they went over to Africa, and so the human beings spread around that continent first, and then came back through Arabia back to the rest of the world. That's quite possible. And the other thing is because the Prophet ﷺ's grandmother is from Africa, Hajar alayhi salam. She's African, she's Egyptian, North African. So, both ways, all human beings on this planet can trace themselves back to the Prophet ﷺ in that sense. Yeah. So that's why, I mentioned the Prophet ﷺ came in Qura. He was born and raised in Qura, the mother of all towns. Mecca, that's the first place, inhabited place. You okay there, Yusuf? I don't know if you can just grab that chair. Sister, is it okay if we get that chair for? You haven't got a chair. Have you got a chair? Oh, he's got a chair. No, it's fine. He's got a chair. You okay? Yeah. All right. Okay, so that's the concern, the Prophet ﷺ had for human beings. And it's true, that realization that we are all one family of human beings. So one of Shaykh Siraj in Liverpool, he mentioned this wisdom, that one of the secrets why Hawa was made from the rib of Sayyidina Adam. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Sayyidina Adam from clay, and then from one of his ribs he created Hawa, his wife. Why? Because it's actually from part of him. So when he meet her, it's like it's part of him. So we see how close that is, that relationship. It's actually physically part of you, this other person. And then all human beings come from that first couple. And that's one of the wisdom why also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't create other spouses for the children of Adam alayhi salam. But they were actually allowed to intermarry within them, within different generation of his children. Because if a new creation comes in, it's ghayr, it's different. It's someone from outside, but we all descend from the same, physically the same flesh. We all come out one from another. So this is then, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, and this is really, these are all lessons there for us, in da'wah, because as we go through the tafsir, you see how much of the Quran is about da'wah, is about giving the message to people. All the stories of the prophets, that's what they're all about. They're teaching us how to take this message to people. The responsibility of that, and what that entails, what struggle it entails, what hardship it entails, what can be the consequences of it. So this is all about da'wah. This is all about struggling for the sake of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this ayah is telling the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, don't become very distressed about this matter. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's sending you as a warner, and He's sending you as someone who gives good tidings. That's it. The rest of the affair is up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If someone is guided or not guided, it's not in your hands. That's what, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying here, according to Imam Fakhruddin al-Razi. And similarly for us, or for any people who embark upon the work of the deen, or the work of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what is expected from us or from the Muslim is to struggle and strive in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the results are not something that is in our hands. The results are not what is expected from us. We're not measured by our results. We're measured by our struggle and our striving and our intention, the purity of our intention of what we're doing. Even if one person becomes Muslim, after all of your struggling, alhamdulillah. If no one becomes Muslim, alhamdulillah. If 1,000 people become Muslim, alhamdulillah. That's not in our control. Because the guidance is the nur that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throws into someone's heart. It's not actually from us, from our struggle. Our struggle and striving is for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's part of our ibadah. It's part of worshipping Him and fulfilling the command He's put upon us. So this obligation of striving in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is an obligation upon this community. It's an obligation upon this community, the final community. If there's people that are fulfilling the obligation, then it's no longer a sin upon everyone else. But if there's not enough people fulfilling the obligation, then everyone becomes sinful, and it becomes, obligatory for everyone to make sure that communal obligation is being fulfilled, just like janazah prayer, just like any other fard kifaya. المبحث الثاني, interrupt me when it's Maghrib time inshallah. قال الليث بخع الرجل نفسه إذا قتلها غيظا من شدة وجده بالشيء. So he says, Al-Layth, one of the scholars, mentioned that the meaning of بخع, from the word باخع نفسك, بخع الرجل نفسه means literally a person killed himself out of severe distress, غيظ, or anger or distress. وقال الأخفش والفراء أصل البخع الجهد. So others, الأخفش and Farah, they said that the core, the root, foundational meaning of bakha is actually juhud, sort of a difficulty, an exertion, um, he goes into somewhat of a more lengthy discussion about the actual meaning of bakha'a, bakhi'un, the root meaning of it. يقال بخعت لك نفسي أي جهدتها. So in the Arabs they can say بخعت لك نفسي أي جهدتها. I have exerted myself for you. So part of the core meaning of it is to exert and to put in effort. وفي حديث عائشة رضي الله عنها أنها ذكرت عمر فقالت بخع الأرض أي جهدها حتى أخذ ما فيها من أموال الملوك. It's also narrated that Sayyidah Aisha used this is the root word بخع الأرض when she was talking about Umar ibn al-Khattab رضي الله عنه. She said he بخع الأرض, he sort of struggled in the land, until he took the wealth of all the nations, the kings of Persia and Rome, etc. So that meaning of jihad, jihud in the struggle, striving. This will give us an insight into the word, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ. فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ. So it's giving us the idea of that word باخع, what it means to sort of to really trouble oneself. وقال الكسائي بخعت الأرض بالزراعة إذا جعلتها ضعيفة بسبب متابعة الحراثة وبخع رجل نفسه إذا نهكها. So just give me some more examples of the use of this word بخع. بخعت الأرض, the land became worn out by excessive use of farming on the land. It became worn out, so that type of meaning as well. Okay. وعلى هذا معنى باخع نفسك أي ناهكها. So according to all of this, the meaning of this phrase باخع نفسك means you're wearing yourself down, struggling, wearing yourself down. وجاهدها, and just exerting and wearing yourself down. حتى تهلكها, until you may even destroy yourself, kill yourself in overexertion. ولكن أهل التأويل كلهم قالوا قاتل نفسك ومهلكها والأصل ما ذكرناه هكذا قال الواحدي. He says, Razi said, however, all of the people of Tafsir, all of the authorities in Tafsir have said regarding this particular phrase, it means قاتل نفسك. قاتل نفسك, you're literally killing yourself, destroying yourself in severe distress. But he said the root of it is what I've mentioned, that is sort of wearying yourself down. So you can imagine this was the actual state of the Prophet ﷺ towards his people. Yeah? And this was his state towards his concern towards non-Muslims. Imagine his concern towards the Muslims. He's a concern towards his ummah, his people, those who follow him. البحث الثالث على آثارهم. So the next part of the ayah, if you look up فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ عَلَى آثَارِهِمْ. So it says أي من بعدهم. يقال مات فلان على أثر فلان أي بعده. So على آثارهم means after them, following after them, or after them. So in Arabic you can say Mata fulan ala athari fulan. So and so died just after so and so. Ala athari. So literally upon his traces were still there, in other words. That's the meaning of athar, mean traces. You know? The Jahili poetry, they often talk about, in their poems, they often talk about traces that are left in the desert. You know, when they come, the poet, he described how he comes through a long journey to try to find the woman that he loves. You know, and then he comes and he finds that the camp has moved on, because there were many Bedouins, you know. They used to have tents and things like that. The camp has moved on, and all that remains is the athar, the traces of where the camp was. So they, you know, they were very much familiar with this term athar, traces, the Arabs, because of their type of lifestyle. You know, they would see the traces of things in the desert. أصل هذا أن الإنسان إذا مات بقيت علاماته وآثاره بعد موته مدة ثم إنها تنمحي وتبطله بالكلية. So he says, you know, the root meaning is, when someone dies, his traces and signs remain for a while before they completely disappear. فإذا كان موته قريبا من موت الأول كان موته حاصلا حال بقاء آثار الأول. So if the second person dies while the traces of the first one still remain, in other words, quite soon after him, that's where you use this phrase, upon the traces of someone. فصح أن يقال مات فلان أثر فلان. البحث الرابع قوله إن لم يؤمنوا بهذا الحديث. So the next part now, going on to the next part. إن لم يؤمنوا بهذا الحديث أسفا. If they do not believe in this, you know, if they do not believe in this statement. المراد بالحديث القرآن. So he says here, the meaning of hadith here, the statement, is the Quran. So if they do not believe in this Quran. قال القاضي وهذا يقتضي وصف القرآن بأنه حديث وذلك يدل على فساد قول من يقول إنه قديم وجوابه أنه محمول على الألفاظ وهي حادثة. So once again he then deviates into one of the favorite topics, which was the createdness or the non-createdness of the Quran, which is not that so relevant to us, you know. But so some of the Mu'tazilites use this to say, look, the Quran was hadith, meaning it's created, because hadatha, the root of that in Arabic, is something which is created or something that comes about. The belief of Ahl-Sunnah wal Jama'ah, as Fakhruddin al-Razi has mentioned many times in the Tafsir, is that the Quran has no beginning, because it's actually the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we can't limit any of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to time, because He has no beginning Himself and no end. He doesn't change with time. He's not contained or contingent upon time. Okay, so Ahl-Sunnah wal Jama'ah, they don't accept that, you know, this is the meaning here. What they do say is, yes, the Quran that we recite, like when I recite the Quran, at that point my words are something that are created, if you see what I mean. You know, I've produced them through my voice and everything. But the Quran that came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not something that was created. It's the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that has no beginning. So that's why, how it's understood by Ahl-Sunnah wal Jama'ah. البحث الخامس قوله أسفا. So then the final part of the ayah, the word asafan, right at the end, which describes the grief for of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Al-asaf al-mubalagha fil huzn. So the meaning of asaf is very extreme huzn, very extreme sadness. So asaf is an extreme sadness. وذكرنا الكلام فيه عند قوله غضبان أسفا في سورة الأعراف. Fakhruddin al-Razi says, I have also already mentioned the full explanation of this particular word in Surah Al-A'raf, verse number 150, which mentions the word غضبان أسفا when talking about Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam. When he found out that they had started worshipping the golden calf, it described that Musa alayhi salam was غضبان أسفا. So if anyone wants to, they can see the full explanation of that word in that there. وَعِنْدَ قَوْلِهِ يَا أَسَفًا عَلَى يُوسُف, and also he's given more explanation of this word in Surah Yusuf, verse number 84, where it's also used. The first one was A'raf 150, verse 150, and the other one is Surah Yusuf, ayah number 84. وَفِي انْتِسَابِهِ وُجُوهٌ. Now you're going to deal with the point of grammar. Why the word asafan is mansub or accusative case in Arabic. So it's got a fatha. Why is it with the fatha? It's called mansub or accusative case in Arabic. There must be a reason why it's in that case. So he says, and once again, I mean, we don't want to get too bogged down into grammatical points, which may not be relevant for everyone. الأول أنه نصب على المصدر ودل ما قبله من الكلام على أنه يأسف. So he says the first explanation is that it is masdar, or what we call also maf'ul mutlaq, which is like when the verbal noun or the masdar is used to add extra emphasis to the sentence. So we already know that the Prophet ﷺ is grieved because it said باخع نفسك. So the word asafan at the end adds more impact. We already know he's grieved, but then it says asafan, so it adds a double impact. So that's in Arabic called maf'ul mutlaq or masdar, and it's used for extra power to the statement. الثاني يجوز أن يكون مفعولا له أي للأسف كقولك جئت ابتغاء الخير. So the second, he said it's possible it could be what's called in Arabic مفعول له, or also known as مفعول لأجله, which basically it's an accusative case which gives the reason for something. Does anyone here know about these things? Mansub, maf'ul, the grammar? Anyone studied grammar much? Or you don't? Yeah. I know Omer has, but he's just dropping off at the moment there. You've done some grammar, Ajrumiyah, or? Yeah. So it's making some sort of sense to you. You done some as well. So. Any brothers from Slough, you've done any grammar or? No Arabic, no grammar? No. You must have done in school and everything. You're doing some with Uthman, isn't it? Are you going to this sort of stuff, or is it? Yeah, good. At least you're sort of making some sense. You're getting the gist of the context of what it's talking about. Okay, so that's the two things. It could be maf'ul mutlaq or maf'ul li ajlihi. In other words, if we say the second one, it's like the reason why he's destroying himself is asafan, because of the grief. You see what I mean? So it could be both ways. الثالث قال الزجاج أسفا منصوب لأنه مصدر في موضع الحال. And then a third opinion also by one of the grammarians was that it's actually mansub because it's masdar but in the place of hal. So, describing the state of someone, the hal. Not much difference between the third and the first opinion really. البحث السادس الفاء في قوله فلعلك جواب الشرط وهو قوله إن لم يؤمنوا قدم عليه ومعناه التأخير. So also says another point in the Arabic, the ayah starts with the fa لعلك باخع, and he says this fa is jawab shart. The how do you say in English, when you have a condition and you have an outcome, so it's like the outcome of the condition. Yeah, shart is a condition. If something happens, then something happens. That's a condition. Very, very important to look at these in the Quran. There's a lot of conditional things in the Quran, that indicate if something happens, then something happens. So he says here, this is the outcome of the condition. In lam yu'minu, if they do not believe, then the Prophet ﷺ is very grieved. So that's the outcome of that condition. If they do not believe, in lam yu'minu. Yeah. But the outcome is mentioned before the condition in the ayah. Yeah. What time is Maghrib today? Is it? Any idea, anyone? Still another 5 minutes? So, okay, now going down to the next ayah. إنا جعلنا ما على الأرض زينة لها لنبلوهم أيهم أحسن عملا. We have placed all that is upon the earth an ornament for it, that we may test them, which of them is the best in action. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, we have made everything upon the earth an ornament for it, for the earth, an ornament for the earth, so that we may test them, which of them is the best in actions or conduct. وَإِنَّا لَجَعِلُنَا مَا عَلَيْهَا صَعِيدًا جُرُزًا. And we will surely make everything that is upon the earth into a flattened plain. Eventually, the end of the earth will be completely flattened, as is mentioned in various different ayahs in the Quran. It says 8:25 on this one. We'll carry on for a couple of minutes and then make sure it's completely in, inshallah. So this, you can see how this carries on from the previous. The Prophet ﷺ was concerned, distressed. These people are not accepting the message. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just saying now, ultimately this is the whole objective of this whole life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created this world so that He may test a human being. لِنَبْلُوَهُمْ أيهم أحسن عملا, so that we may test them which of them is the best in action. That is ultimately the whole purpose of this earth being the way it is. Yeah? At the end of this time of the human beings being tested, the earth will be destroyed, it will be flattened. Yeah? That was the purpose we're here, and the way it's been embellished and ornamented is for us here as a test. So just, putting everything back into perspective, what life is all about. That's what the Quran does for us, always. Whenever we recite Quran and start reflecting upon it, it just reorientates us, turns us back to reality. Just reminds us what is actually happening in our life. Because our nature is to forget, our nature is to just become engrossed in the worldly pursuits, in everyday worries and concerns, and to forget about actually what's the reality of our life. That we're just here to be tested. That's it, nothing else. We are just here simply to be tested. Yeah? Quite an amazing thing that I think Shaykh Akram was saying the other day in the talk he did in the conference we had. He was saying this life is a struggle, it's a sacrifice from beginning to end. We should look at it in that way. Just realize that's what it is. It is a sacrifice, it's a struggle. We're not here to enjoy ourselves, to build up big pleasures and luxuries and all these things. That's not what we're here for. We're here to make some sacrifice, make some struggle. It's going to be in our own families, to bring up our children. Sacrificing for our children to bring them up in a good way. Our time, our money, or whatever, all of these things for our families. And then the wider struggle and sacrifice for the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's also upon us as a Muslim community. The Muslim, he looks forward to having luxuries in the next life. Now that's the abode of luxury and relaxation and happiness and enjoyment. Not in this life. Okay, inshallah, let's take a break for Maghrib, inshallah. Salli sallam barik ala Sayyidina Muhammad Mustafa wa Nisar, you going to do adhan, inshallah? Or anyone here? بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد مصطفى. So في الآية مسائل. المسألة الأولى قال القاضي وجه النظم كأنه تعالى يقول يا محمد إني خلقت الأرض وزينتها صلى الله عليه وسلم وأخرجت منها أنواع المنافع والمصالح والمقصود من خلقها بما فيها من المنافع ابتلاء الخلق بهذه التكاليف ثم إنهم يكفرون ويتمردون مع ذلك فلا أقطع عنهم مواد هذه النعم فأنت أيضا يا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ينبغي أن لا تنتهي في الحزن بسبب كفرهم إلى أن تترك الاشتغال بدعوتهم إلى دين الحق. So I'm not sure who Imam Fakhruddin Razi means when he refers to Al-Qadi. Well, he mentions anyway Al-Qadi. his opinion was here in this ayah. Um, we have made all that is upon the earth an embellishment or an ornament for it, so that we may test them, which of them is the best in action. And we will surely make everything that is upon it a flat surface, a flattened land. So Al-Qadi says that the context of this is, it is as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I have created the earth and all of its ornamentation, all of the beauty upon the earth, and I have, created all of these provisions and luxuries. And the reason for creating all of this and all of these luxuries and provisions and all of these things upon the earth is to test people. And of course, not just human beings, but also jinn come into that equation as well. بهذه التكاليف. And what is the test for the human being? It is these takalif, these responsibilities that we have been given. We are here with responsibilities. There are things, obligatory things we have to do. We're not just here. أَيَحْسَبُ الْإِنسَانُ يُتْرَكَ سُدًى. Does human being think that he is just to be left aimless without any cause? We are here with this takalif, these responsibilities. We have to fulfill them. We can't just dodge here and there and avoid these responsibilities that are upon us. These are what are called the fard, fard ayn, fard kifaya. Fard ayn, fard kifaya. Things which are obligatory upon us as individuals and upon us as a community. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, I created all of this to test people, and there are some of them that disbelieve, yakfurun, and they are rebellious and arrogant against me. But I still keep giving them these blessings and these provisions and all of these embellishments in the dunya. So you, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in other words, it's saying to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, also one of the meaning that you should continue in your work of da'wah. Don't give up. Don't feel distressed that they're not responding to the call. Look what they're doing. Look at their kufr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Look at their ungratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who has given them all of these blessings, all of these things He has given them. And look at their ingratitude, but yet He still gives them provision in this world. So the Prophet ﷺ also carry on with the work that you are doing. Don't give up. So this is the nature of doing the work of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is difficult. It's a struggle. You feel like giving up. You feel like giving up because it's very difficult. And if there was any better work that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had created, He would have given that work for the prophets and the messengers. There's no better work to do than calling people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, doing the work of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's da'wah. That's what we call jihad, struggling in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If there was any better thing, that occupation, the prophets and the messengers, who are the best of all creation, would have been given that occupation. There's no better occupation. And it's the most difficult of work. These are the best of people, the prophets, but they're finding this difficulty in it, this distress, this struggle. It's not an easy work, but then that's why the Quran is always encouraging, reassuring, motivating, re-engaging oneself So it's upon all of us as a community to engage in this work. If we are not people who are going to be directly involved in that work of the deen, then we have to support that work with our, obviously with our prayers, but also with our money. We have to support the work with our money. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, هَلْ أَدُلُّكُمْ عَلَى تِجَارَةٍ تُنْجِيكُم مِّنْ عَذَابٍ أَلِيمٍ. Should I guide you, should I indicate to you a trade that will save you from a painful punishment? A tijara, a trade that will save you from a painful punishment. تُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ وَتُجَاهِدُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ بِأَمْوَالِكُمْ وَأَنفُسِكُمْ. Believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger, because without Iman none of the other things are going to benefit anyone. And then تُجَاهِدُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, struggle and strive in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with your wealth and your lives. So wealth is mentioned first according to some of the scholars of Tafsir, because wealth is something that all Muslims must give to support the deen. There only will be some that will struggle with their lives. There will always be a group of the Ummah that will give that extra level of sacrifice and effort, and to even give up their all of their time and all of their lives for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it's upon the whole community to support the struggle of the deen with their wealth. Even, you see amongst evangelical Christians, they give their 10% of their income to the church. They call it the tithes, or tithes, I think they call it tithes. And they pay, it's like a tax they have to pay straight away when they get their salary, 10%, to support their missionary church, their missionary efforts of their church. These are Christians doing that for their deen. So this is what we have to do as a community. We have to support the work of the deen. This deen has always been supported by spending from the time of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ was encouraging the Sahaba to give to support the struggle, the jihad and the fi sabilillah. He was sending Sayyidina Bilal around with carrying a sheet for people to throw in their money, and the women to throw in their gold and everything. And the Quran was coming exhorting people to give to support the struggle of the deen. So that's how always the deen is carried, through sacrifice of the community, sacrificing their wealth. So it doesn't matter if you have much or little, but to give from whatever you have. Even if you have little, you give your 10%. If you have much, give your 10%. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives tawfiq. المسألة الثانية اختلفوا في تفسير هذه الزينة. Second thing he says, second point of interest, there's a difference of opinion. What is the meaning of this zina that is talked about in this ayah? إِنَّا جَعَلْنَا مَا عَلَى الْأَرْضِ زِينَةً لَهَا. We have made what is upon the earth an ornament, a zina, an ornament. What is this ornament that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about here upon the earth? فَقَالَ بَعْضُهُمْ النَّبَاتُ وَالشَّجَرُ. Some scholars said it refers to the trees and the plants and all of these, nature that is around us. وَضَمَّ بَعْضُهُمْ إِلَيْهِ الذَّهَبُ وَالْفِضَّةَ وَالْمَعَادِنِ. Some said yes, it also includes all of these plants and trees, but it also includes the gold and silver and all of these precious minerals that are found in the earth. وَضَمَّ بَعْضُهُمْ إِلَى سَائِرِ الْحَيَوَانَاتِ. Some of them said it also includes all of the animals that are upon the earth. وَقَالَ بَعْضُهُمْ بَلْ الْمُرَادَ النَّاسِ فَهُمْ زِينَةُ الْأَرْضِ. Some said no, the meaning here is the human being, because the human being is the ultimate ornament of the earth, being the pinnacle of all creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وبالجملة ليس بالأرض إلا المواليد ثلاثة وهو المعادن والنبات والحيوان. So Ar-Razi rahimahullah says, to summarize, we can say that upon the earth there are only three categories of objects upon the earth. You have minerals, plants, and animal. Mineral, plant, and animal. Yeah. So obviously, a human being comes under animal. أشرف أنواع الحيوان الإنسان. So he says the most noble of all the animal species is a human being. وقال القاضي الأولى أنه لا يدخل في هذه الزينة المكلف لأنه تعالى قال إنا جعلنا ما على الأرض زينة لها لنبلوهم فمن يبلوه يجب أن لا يدخل في ذلك. So according to one of the Mufassirin, he said the mukallaf, the one who has responsibility, should not come under this zina, this in ornamentation, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says we have created upon the earth everything upon the earth that is an ornament for it, so that we may test them. So the one being tested should not come under the zina, the ornamentation. So all of the rest of plants and all the rest of the animals do come under that general zina, the ornamentation of the earth that is referred to in this ayah. فإنهم يدخلون فيه كدخول سائر ما ينتفع به. So plants, animals, and everything else that is useful or something that is provision for us upon the earth, all comes under the zina, this ornamentation of the earth that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has done. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Al-malu wal-banuna zinatul hayati dunya. Yep, that's right. Yeah, that's a bit different because that's zinatul hayati dunya. This is zinatul ard. Yeah, so al-hayatu dunya is this like our life on this world, but the ard is the actual earth itself. If you know what I mean, the earth. So it's slightly different. Oh yeah, good point. وقوله زينة لها أي للأرض ولا يمكن أن يكون ما يحسن بالأرض زينة للأرض كما جعل الله السماء زينة بزينة الكواكب. So this zina, this ornamentation is laha. What does it mean for it? For it meaning the earth itself. So the zina is for the earth itself. The ornamentation is for the earth itself. Laha, zinatan laha. The lam there meaning for. So ornamentation for the earth itself. Just as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also has made the heaven ornamented by the stars. As mentioned in the Quran, the heaven is ornamented with the stars, beautified, ornamented with the stars. أما قوله لنبلوهم أيهم أحسن عملا ففيه مسائل. So going on to the next part of the ayah, so that we may test them. Which of them is the best in action? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests us in this world. The primary test is Iman and Kufr, or Islam and Kufr. Will you be Muslim? Will you submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Will you be mu'min? Will you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the unseen? الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. They believe in the unseen, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the unseen. Because if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was not ghaib in our world, then there will be no test. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was manifested to us, then there would be no test. So that's the test. الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. That's how Surah Al-Baqarah starts straight away. You know, those who believe in the unseen. They believe in what they cannot see. You know? So that's the first thing. Or will you have kufr? So kufr means to deny the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because a human being is here, we are here, we find ourselves here in this world, in this existence, full of lots of blessings. Yeah? When we start reflecting upon our own state, we realize we are full of so many blessings. Blessing of existence itself, life itself. You know? Where has that come about? How did we come about to be? You know? Something to be just reflected upon. Because we take it for granted, but we don't think about it. When you think about it, is the greatest blessing itself is existence. Is to be alive, be a conscious being, you know. Secondly, then our aql, intellects that we have been given, our ruh, our heart, our emotions, all of these things, the five senses, we are loaded up with the blessings and gift of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's why kufr is to deny, to cover up, to deny the blessings and favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's the first test. And then we have the test of man huwa ahsanu amala, who's the best in action in your behavior. So who acts righteously. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test us through two ways. Through giving us blessings and to taking away things from us and giving us tribulations. So it can either be through giving or through tribulation. Both ways is test. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us things, gives us wealth or health or all of these things, the test there is, do we have shukr? Are we grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Do we remain upon the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Or do we at that point forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and go about enjoying in luxuries and all of that? That's the test if you have shukr at that point. And then sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test us through tribulations and hardships and taking things away from us. And the test there is, do we have sabr? Do we have patience? Do we have patience, or do we lose our patience and become either angry or depressed or dejected or despair? Which then means we failed the test. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us sabr and shukr. So he says, in this particular statement there are several issues. المسألة الأولى ذهب هشام بن الحكم إلى أنه تعالى لا يعلم الحوادث إلا عند دخولها في الوجود. Once again, he's going to go into an aqidah issue. Because Imam Fakhruddin is obviously a famous theologian, so that's why he's often dealing with a lot of aqidah issues in the Tafsir. Once again, some of them are out of date in a way, that they're not relevant to us because they're not issues for us now. Things that the Mu'tazilites believed in the past, not really so relevant. Some of those things are still relevant, some aren't. And there are new things in our age which we have to deal with in Aqidah. So our scholars have got new issues that they have to address. Because the science of Aqidah is always has two aspects. One is to teach Muslims their creed or their belief, what they have to believe in about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, about His messengers, about the last day, about heaven and hell, etc. The other aspect of Aqidah is to refute those deviant groups or sects or ideologies that attack the beliefs and doctrine of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, that will change from time to time. So sometimes there's limited benefit in studying Aqidah texts that were written many centuries ago. Of that nature, the ones that refute other sects and beliefs. There is benefit in studying those that deal with our belief and our Aqidah, our creed, because that remains the same. But those that deal with the challenges of their time, will be different to the challenges of our time. So here he's referring to one of the, once again, some Mu'tazilite issues, where they said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't have knowledge of things that happen until they happen. They said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not have knowledge of things that happen until they actually happen. So once again, that whole, the issues of free will and qadar, predestination, was something they deviated away from the position of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. وعلى هذا الابتلاء والامتحان على الله جائز. So in other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, لِنَبْلُوَهُمْ, we test them to see which are best in action. Mu'tazila said, why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala test people if He already knows the outcome? So that's where they fell astray, with that type of thinking. As Imam At-Tahawi rahimahullah says, the deep secret of qadr, predestination, and free will, is not something that is within the realm of human intellect to grasp the full deep secret of that. So it's useless contemplating and delving into that too much. All we need to know is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us, that He has got knowledge of everything that takes place. He has knowledge of that. All of that is written before it takes place. Okay. واحتج عليه بأنه تعالى لو كان عالما بالجزئيات قبل وقوعها لكان كل ما علم وقوعه واجب الوقوع وكل ما علم عدمه ممتنع الوقوع وإلا لازم الانقلاب عمله جهلا وذلك محال والمفضي إلى المحال محال ولو كان ذلك واجبا فالذي علم وقوعه يجب كونه فاعلا له. So he just describes the argument of the Mu'tazilites. So I think I might skip over it. I'll skip on to the bit where he mentions what is the opinion of the majority of the Muslims, or the Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. He says, أما جمهور علماء الإسلام فقد استبعدوا هذا القول. He says, as for the majority of the ulama of Islam, in the position of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, فقد استبعدوا هذا القول. They rejected this position that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge is only comes about when the thing happens. وقالوا إنه تعالى من الأزل العبري عالم جميع الجزئيات. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from pre-eternity until eternity has got complete knowledge of all particular and detailed occurrences, all the details of everything that takes place. فالابتلاء والامتحان محالان عليه. So it's not possible that he could test someone in the meaning that we understand of testing, because his knowledge is already complete. of everything. Yeah. وأينما وردت هذه الألفاظ فالمراد أنه تعالى يعاملهم معاملة لو صدرت تلك المعاملة من غيره لكان ذلك لا سبيل للابتلاء والامتحان. So wherever these words are mentioned in the Quran with reference, or in the Hadith with reference to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He will test them, or ibtila and imtihan is testing creation, it means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will deal with them in a way that if that dealing had come from other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it would have been a test. So that doesn't really say much actually, but it's a very precise way of phrasing the Ahl Sunnah understanding. In other words, it's a bit like tafweed. Tafweed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we accept what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran as He intended it, but we cannot really grasp that fully. So we don't really try to delve into it very much as well. Because it's beyond our comprehension. Which is وَقَدْ ذَكَرْنَا هَذِهِ الْمَسْأَلَةَ مِرَارًا كَثِيرًا. He says we have many times gone over this same mas'ala in this book. Any questions about that? Okay, inshallah, so we'll leave it there for today, inshallah. جزا الله عنا سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ما هو أهله. جزا الله عنا سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ما هو أهله. جزا الله عنا سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ما هو أهله. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين الحمد لله رب العالمين.